believe Mario Kart has been around for 25 years? 25 years of dodging shells, picking up coins, power sliding your way to victory, and calling all other kart racing games Mario Kart clones. Good times. Following a recent heated argument in a pub as to whether actually Crash Team Racing was physically, morally, and intellectually superior to all Mario Kart iterations, we decided to skip merrily back through our childhoods to bring you 12 games that really weren't straight rip-offs of Mario Kart. Honest. Let's start with the obvious one then. Crash Team Racing released for the original PlayStation in 1999, featuring all 15 of your favourite Crash series characters. You know, like Fake Crash, Polar, Purah, Dingodile, Tiny Tiger, who's never done a leg day in his entire life, by the way. The gang's all here, scooping up Wampa fruits in lieu of coins, 10 will make you go faster, and smashing up crates for power-ups. Nothing familiar about all this at all. But to be fair to Crash Team Racing, even Mario Kart clones can be good fun in their own right. And even though Crash didn't try anything wildly new, everything it did do, it did well. And it pretty much introduced a whole new generation to the racing genre. The courses were fun, the controls smooth, there was a lot to love. Apart from maybe the sound, but then not everything can be as iconic as Mario Kart's various themes and bleeps and bloops.
Papu not himself today. Maybe Papu not eating a big breakfast.
Released in 1997, Diddy Kong Racing wasn't just about karts. It had hovercrafts and aeroplanes, all piloted by adorable animals with names like Timber the Tiger, Bumper the Badger, and Tip Tup the Turtle. It's a game of pure sunshine and rainbows, all bright colours and catchy music. It also features Banjo, who went on to star in Banjo-Kazooie a few months later, and Conker, all cutesy and child-friendly before his descent into a foul-mouthed alcoholic in 2001. Many critics and players at the time actually considered Diddy Kong Racing superior to Mario Kart 64, which had launched less than a year before. There were plans for a sequel on the GameCube, but hopes were punctured when this Donkey Kong Racing was eventually cancelled, despite a trailer at E3 2001 when Nintendo's stake in Rare was bought out by Microsoft in 2002.
Anyone remember the Codemasters kart racer with a Formula 1 licence? F1 AllStars was a bit of an odd one. You played as real-life racers that looked like they'd been put through the Disney Infinity character creator. Famous faces like Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg and Michael Schumacher were made to look impossibly cute as they zoomed around condensed versions of Japan, Brazil and the US. Despite Codemasters saying F1 AllStars was focused more on pure entertainment than serious simulation, the game did differentiate itself from other similar titles in that it didn't feature a drift mechanic and players would instead have to brake and slipstream their way around tracks. The result of that is F1 AllStars felt a little more plodding than most other races, despite the KERS, or Kinetic Energy Recovery System, which meant you could boost your speed by driving over certain sections of track and squeezing the right trigger. Making things feel even slower were pit stops, where you could drive in to repair cars damaged by power-ups, which would drive slower as a result. Speaking of power-ups, these were very transparent Mario Kart lifts, but without any of Mario Kart's personality or quirkiness. Lacking as Formula 1 is in anthropomorphic animals or magical kingdoms from which to draw inspiration, these power-ups were mostly bubbles or balloons in a variety of colours. At the end of the day, if you're going to create a game based on a caricature of real-life events and individuals, you'd better bring some personality to the table, and F1 AllStars just didn't have the goods.
You know you're about as formulaic a kart racer as you can possibly get when not even a Final Fantasy license can save you from looking like a tired copy. Chocobo Racing was exactly that, And as adorable as the prospect of controlling a chocobo on motor-powered roller skates was, it couldn't save players from lots of fairly repetitive gameplay. Final Fantasy fans probably still enjoyed all the familiar creatures, of course, like Mog and Behemoth with black and white mages, but there just wasn't enough substance or personality to Chocobo Racing to deflect the arguably accurate accusations of Square simply rushing to cash in on the kart racing genre, made popular by Mario Kart. Its take on power-ups was collecting stones resembling classic Final Fantasy spells to level up and create havoc for opponents. Spells like Haste, Blizzaga, and Reflect. But ultimately, the system wasn't enough to make it stand out from the crowd. If you want a game that lets you zoom around as Cloud Strife, you're better off going back and playing the G-Bike minigame at the Gold Saucer.
A more recent clone that did get things right was Sega and Sonic AllStars Racing. It certainly helped that it had more of an interesting roster of licenses to pick one of 20 colourful characters from, though some of these sat more comfortably alongside one another than others. But hey, who really cares when you get to drive around in Ryo's forklift truck from Shenmue? Characters having their own special all-star move and tracks paying homage to various Sega franchises ensure Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing feels different to other races. It has enough fan service that it doesn't lean completely on Mario Kart adjacent gameplay, and the racing itself was pretty solid too, with multiple modes that kept players coming back for more. That said, buttery smooth controls and characters like Amy Rose and Big the Cat just aren't quite enough to elevate the game to an iconic status, even if it was the best kart racer of the Xbox 360 PS3 era.
Hurtling back in time again, Street Racer originally launched on the SNES in 1994 and made the intriguing decision to merge kart racing with mild beat-em-up mechanics, targeting a slightly more adult audience than Mario Kart's decidedly younger demographic. Posing itself as the alternate racing game to play with friends after stumbling home from the pub, Street Racer had players race around fairly basic tracks while sideswiping opponents with their fists, avoiding explosives and using personalised power-ups. Widely cited as having been inspired by Mario Kart, it feels like publisher Ubisoft wasn't quite as shy about the creative debt it owed to Nintendo as other titles, but reviews at the time were mixed, with criticisms ranging from its tacky characters to downright crap controls.
Little Big Planet Karting was developed by the same team that worked on the well-received Mod Nation Racers, a title that shared Little Big Planet's focus on user-created content, and just like those games, it also had a level editor that allowed users to create new tracks and challenges, but it never seemed to find its own niche. The game was a mix of Little Big Planet and kart racing, skewing more towards the former, I think, and so it wasn't really ever going to be an excellent kart racer in its own right. It felt it needed the additional support of its community to keep making new stuff and keep the appeal going, and that just wasn't there. LBP karting was sort of forgotten about by all but the most ardent sackboys and girls out there pretty early on after its release.
Released in 1999, around the end of the third season of the show, South Park Rally is the third South Park game developed by Acclaim. They were all fairly awful licensed products, and despite South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone providing voice lines for the games, they've since criticised Acclaim for the pretty shoddy quality of all three titles. South Park Rally received particularly negative reviews, with most players and critics calling the gameplay overly simplistic, the graphics decent, and the sound effects and various audio samplings barely comprehensible. Power-ups rarely provided any real assistance, and the computer AI was entirely unforgiving. The real joy of playing a karting game, Mario Kart clone or not, is the sense that at any time the tables can turn. That's what makes them such fun party games. South Park Rally missed this memo entirely though, throwing players onto bland, forgettable tracks with bland AI characters that were almost impossible to catch up to. This one's a hard pass, I'm afraid, and I'm not just talking about Mr. Hanky.
Konami Crazy Racers had itself a very difficult task launching the Game Boy Advance. It was going up directly against Mario Kart Super Circuit as a launch title for the system, until Nintendo's racer, known as Mario Kart Advance in Japan, was delayed by a few months, and suddenly this game had itself a fighting chance. Konami had plenty of licenses to choose from for its races, but most of them were fairly obscure, even in 2001. You've got Greythox from Metal Gear Solid, Dracula from Castlevania, Gomon from Mystical Ninja. We're deep into Konami lore here, but everything else, from the power-ups to the tight controls, are actually pure Mario Kart, which could even have been the problem, because as a competent game as Crazy Racers was, it just couldn't compete in a straight race with the real deal. When Super Circuit launched a few months later, it was met with near universal critical acclaim. And Crazy Racers, although to its credit is still met with fond memories by those that actually played it, just couldn't keep up.
Start your engine!
As someone consistently baffled as to why some of the most famous locations in the world, New York's Times Square, London's Leicester Square, have prime real estate dedicated to multiple floors of M&M's world, I'm bemused but not all that surprised that there is an M&M's kart racing game for the Wii. I'm also not entirely surprised that it's been called one of the worst games ever made. But I just can't picture the type of person that would go out and buy this game when it launched in 2007 and expect it to have a memorable experience. We're deep into shovelware territory now, people, and if you thought that driving around a pearly textured chocolate factory as a piece of anthropomorphic confectionery, scooping up coins and clipping through scenery was going to be worth either your time or your money, you only have yourself to blame, really. I guess the nicest thing you can say about M&M's Kart Racing is that without any power-ups or shortcuts or interactive scenery of any kind, it's not a straight-up Mario Kart clone. But it'd be all the better if it had at least tried. And you know what, let's be real for a second. M&M's chocolate isn't all that anyway. Don't at me.
Right around the time you couldn't breathe for hearing that maddening I like to move it refrain sung by a lemur, DreamWorks dipped its toe into the karting clone waters with Madagascar Karts. Pretty much every IP had a stab at a kart racing spin-off from the late 90s to the late noughties, and criticising a children's film tie-in game for being a soulless cash grab is, of course, low-hanging fruit. So instead, perhaps it's a more interesting observation to say that Madagascar Karts wasn't entirely terrible. Predictably, the game runs out of Madagascar characters fairly quickly after the core four, the penguins and the aforementioned lemur, so it drafts in Shrek and Bob from Monsters vs. Aliens in an attempt to round out the roster. The gameplay is adequate and character animations are actually pretty nice, particular shout out for Melvin the Giraffe, but the question is, does anyone really love the Madagascar films more than they love Mario? Mario Kart Wii exists, so why should Madagascar Karts need to? Ah well, at least you got a Madagascar Karts wheel bundled in with the Wii version of the game. That was by no means in any way similar to the Mario Kart Wii wheel, so don't even compare the two.
Another game considered by its fans to be better than Mario Kart 64 was Speed Freaks, or Speed Punks if you were in the US. Sticking to colourful and cartoony graphics, it went toe-to-toe with Crash Team Racing on the PS1 in terms of looks, even if it couldn't quite offer the depth of CTR's various modes. Like basically everything else on this list, Speed Freaks offered the same mix of power-ups and individual racer strengths and weaknesses, power slides and boosting, but the difference lies in whether a Mario Kart clone brings a sense of itself to the table in addition to the well-worn mechanical formula, and Speed Freaks certainly delivered on that front, even if, we're honest, practically no one remembers it today.
So, do you think it's fair to label all these games Mario Kart clones, or are there worse offenders that we're overlooking? Are the days of clone cash-ins behind us now? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe for more from Eurogamer. Bye!